You've probably believed that being nice is inherently good, that if you are polite enough, helpful enough, agreeable enough, people will like you, relationships will flourish, and life will feel safe. But what if I told you that this very belief could be quietly eroding who you are? That beneath every automatic smile, every unconsidered yes, every apology you hand out without thinking, there is a cost few dare to name. Carl Jung observed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not the ego, not confidence, not the polished mask you show to the world. He meant the raw, unnegotiated truth of yourself, your needs, limits, desires, and fears, without hiding behind performance or approval. When you sit with that idea, it can feel unsettling, because beneath the layers of compliance and politeness, beneath the effort to be easy, low maintenance, or the good one, lives a tension that never truly rests. Most people don't struggle with being unkind. They struggle with fear. Fear that saying no will fracture a bond, that asserting a boundary will lead to disapproval, that existing fully will be too much for someone else to handle. And so you adapt. Somewhere along the way, you learn that harmony equals safety, that being agreeable guaranteed inclusion, that approval was the currency of connection. You read the room before speaking, adjusted your desires to prevent conflict, and offered yourself just enough to avoid rejection. This wasn't weakness. It was survival. It was intelligence under pressure. But the cost is subtle and insidious. When you abandon yourself long enough, you forget why you were protecting anyone in the first place. The kindness you show is no longer generosity, it is compliance. Every swallowed opinion, every unspoken no, every automatic apology begins to accumulate in the body and mind. It shows up as tension you can't quite release, as a fatigue sleep doesn't cure, as resentment that quietly simmers beneath polite smiles. Jung would say that the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge do not vanish. They go underground and form the shadow. People-pleasing lives squarely in that shadow. The truth is uncomfortable. People-pleasers aren't motivated solely by concern for others. They are motivated by fear. Fear of disconnection, fear of misunderstanding, fear of being labeled selfish or too much. Early in life, you learned which traits were acceptable and which had to be hidden to maintain love and belonging. And so you became agreeable instead of honest, helpful instead of clear, available instead of grounded. At first it works. People like you. They rely on you. They expect you. But slowly, quietly, something shifts. You start feeling invisible in your own life. Your yeses feel heavier. Your smiles feel tighter. Your needs fade into background noise. This is not a flaw in your character. It is the natural result of living from a split. Jung called this the loss of individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you learn to be to survive. And the nice persona, it is a mask. Protective, yes, but demanding. It consumes energy, prevents intimacy, and eventually suffocates the self beneath it. People pleasers often feel lonely even when surrounded by others, unseen despite being appreciated, guilty for wanting space or honesty. Compliance masquerades as connection, but it is negotiation, not intimacy. When you say yes while your body says no, your nervous system notices. When you apologize for existing comfortably, your psyche registers that message. When you suppress your truth to keep the peace, the shadow grows louder. Burnout does not come from doing too much. It comes from being someone you're not. And here is the part most people don't want to hear. You people please not because you care too much, but because you don't yet trust yourself enough to risk disapproval. This is not an insult. It is an invitation. Because growth begins when you turn toward what you fear. For the people pleaser, that fear isn't conflict, it is rejection. It is being seen clearly and still choosing yourself. Self-acceptance, in Jung's view, is terrifying because it forces you to step out from behind your mask. You can no longer outsource your worth. You can no longer negotiate your boundaries to maintain belonging. You have to become responsible for your own approval. And in doing so, everything changes. Jung draws a clear distinction. Kindness is not self-erasure. Kindness flows from wholeness. People-pleasing flows from fragmentation. A kind person gives from fullness. A people-pleaser gives from fear. A kind person can say no without collapse. A people pleaser says yes while quietly resenting it. A kind person trusts that truth strengthens relationships. A people pleaser believes truth threatens them. Until you question that belief, the cycle continues. You keep showing up for others while disappearing from yourself. Praised yet empty. Wondering why being good never feels good enough. Awareness is the first step. Not fixing, not forcing, not becoming less nice. Simply noticing. Noticing how quickly you say yes, how often you apologize, how conflict freezes you, how approval feels like oxygen, because what you bring into awareness loses its unconscious grip. Being nice is not noble if it costs you your self-respect. Being agreeable isn't virtuous if it silences your truth. Being liked is not connection if it requires self-abandonment. The goal is wholeness, and wholeness requires reclaiming every part of yourself you once split off to be loved. If this feels uncomfortably accurate, good. That discomfort is awareness waking up. It is the first sign that the mask has been seen clearly. And once you see it, the next step is to confront the first trap, the compulsive yes, the silent surrender of your will, the automatic prioritization of others' comfort over your own. That's where the chains tighten and where we begin breaking them, one honest no at a time. Once you recognize the mask of niceness for what it is, you begin to feel its weight. The most immediate and persistent trap appears in the form of the automatic yes. It slips out before you've even had a chance to check in with yourself. Polite on the surface, heavy in the body, leaving a quiet trace of regret in its wake. Jung observed that such automatic behaviors are rarely conscious choices. They are reactions, old patterns locked into the psyche as survival strategies. You are not deciding. You are responding from a place that learned long ago how to stay safe by accommodating others. This compulsive yes is a signal from the unconscious. Somewhere earlier in life, childhood, adolescence, or even early adulthood, you learned that saying no carried risk, disappointment, tension, conflict, withdrawal. Your nervous system encoded compliance as safety. Over time, this pattern became automatic, forming part of what Jung described as the personal unconscious, behaviors that once protected you but now quietly imprison you. Every unconsidered yes reinforces a hidden rule, that your needs are negotiable, that your presence is secondary, that access to you is unlimited. At first, saying yes may feel like being needed. It brings a fleeting sense of purpose and connection. But slowly it shifts. Being relied upon turns into being taken for granted. Being present for others turns into invisibility. And inside, resentment begins to accumulate. Jung would say that this resentment is not about the other person. It is the psyche protesting self-erasure. Each unchosen yes is an unspoken no to yourself. Every act of compliance leaves a residue, a quiet, "Why am I always the one?" or a simmering, "They don't even notice me." Yet most people pleasers respond to this tension by trying harder. They give more. They smooth over conflict more carefully. They double down on being agreeable, as if the next smile, the next yes, will finally secure approval. But this only deepens the internal split. The shadow grows louder, leaking through irritability, exhaustion, passive aggression, or sudden withdrawal. You may feel confused by your own reactions, snapping unexpectedly, pulling away without explanation, oscillating between guilt and anger. The automatic yes is a trap because it keeps you fragmented, exhausted, and unseen. Breaking free begins with pausing, not arguing, not justifying, not over-explaining, simply pause. That pause interrupts the unconscious pattern and creates a moment of choice. In that moment, ask yourself, do I actually want to do this? Do I have the capacity? Am I saying yes to avoid discomfort or because it aligns with my truth? This is not selfishness. This is consciousness. Jung taught that awareness transforms compulsion into choice. By noticing the pattern, you diminish its power to control you. At first, choosing yourself may feel wrong. Guilt may rush in immediately. Your chest may tighten. Your mind may bargain. These are withdrawal symptoms of people-pleasing, the old self reacting to a shift in patterns that once guaranteed safety. The nervous system has learned obedience to others as a survival mechanism. Now it must relearn self-trust. The goal is not swinging to aggression nor abandoning kindness. It is practicing clean, grounded numbers. Simple statements. I can't this time. That doesn't work for me. I don't have the capacity right now. Calm, clear, and free of apology. Jung emphasized that real strength is alignment. When your inner and outer worlds match, energy returns. People pleasers are exhausted because they live in contradiction. Their words say yes while their body says no. Every deliberate, conscious no restores coherence and vitality. And surprisingly, most people handle these no's just fine. Some even respect you more. Those who do not, they reveal that their connection depended on your availability, not your authentic self. This can sting, but it is liberating. You no longer manage expectations at the cost of your own sanity. This is the first step toward individuation, the psychological process of reclaiming the self. Jung taught that growth requires risking disappointment, standing in your truth even when others do not mirror it back. Each practice pause, each conscious no, chips away at the automatic yes. And within these small acts of courage, you begin to reclaim your boundaries, your energy, and your presence. You begin to notice subtle changes, relief in the body, clarity in thought, quiet pride in integrity. At this point, it is helpful to pause and reflect. Notice the moments when you habitually say yes to avoid conflict, discomfort, or disapproval. How often have you overridden your capacity for the sake of being liked? When did your energy slip quietly into others' hands without acknowledgement? Take a mental note or even write it down. This reflection is not judgment, it is awareness. And awareness is the first step toward freeing yourself. Share your insights if you feel moved. This practice of noticing and articulating patterns strengthens consciousness, anchors integration, and reminds you that you are not alone in this struggle. The compulsive yes is more than a habit. It is a signal from the unconscious, a marker of where you have surrendered to external expectations at the expense of your own needs. Each conscious pause, each deliberate no, interrupts this pattern. Each choice reinforces the principle that your life, your energy, and your presence are not negotiable. Jung would say that individuation begins here, with noticing, interrupting, and reclaiming the space that is inherently yours. Even after you begin pausing before the automatic yes, after you start practicing deliberate no's, the work of reclaiming yourself is far from complete. The real challenge emerges not in what you say, but in what you believe you are allowed to feel and need. This is where the internal traps become most persistent: the apology reflex, conflict avoidance, approval hunger, and guilt. Jung teaches that the shadow is never eliminated. It waits beneath the surface, demanding acknowledgement, integration, and respect. For the people pleaser, the shadow is not cruelty, it is selfhood, the authentic parts of you that were suppressed to maintain acceptance. Consider the apology reflex. It manifests everywhere. When you bump into someone, when you speak up, when you take space, an automatic sorry slips out. Not because you are at fault, but because your presence, your needs, even your very existence, once felt inconvenient. Early lessons in life created a rule in the psyche. If tension exists, I must be the problem. Over time, this rule becomes invisible, unquestioned, and internalized. Every apology reinforces a sense of smallness and signals uncertainty about your right to exist fully. It invites others, unconsciously, to step over you. Breaking the apology reflex is not about being rude, it is about precision. Before apologizing, ask yourself, did I actually do something wrong? Or am I managing someone else's discomfort? If it is not your fault, replace the apology with presence, stillness, or clarity. This subtle shift begins to restore dignity and reinforces the idea that you exist without needing constant validation or permission. It is a quiet act of self-respect, a step toward alignment between your internal and external worlds. Conflict avoidance is equally pervasive. People pleasers perceive disagreement as danger. Raised voices, tension, differing opinions, they trigger the nervous system as if survival is at stake. So you smooth, defer, accommodate, and give in. Jung observed that avoiding conflict does not eliminate it, it internalizes it. Suppressed truth accumulates as anxiety, depression, or self-doubt. Conflict is not the enemy of connection. Dishonesty is. Healthy tension clarifies relationships, exposes reality, and allows growth. To tolerate conflict without collapsing is to exercise individuation, standing psychologically whole even when others do not mirror or affirm your selfhood. Then there is approval hunger, the subtle and persistent need for external validation. You adjust opinions, tone down desires, and filter your truth, seeking affirmation to confirm that you are good enough. In Jungian terms, this is outsourcing self-worth, surrendering your center to external mirrors. No matter how much approval you receive, it never satisfies fully. It fades, and you are compelled to seek more. The antidote is self-authorization, the internal practice of agreeing with yourself before seeking consensus from others, of standing by your values even in silence, even when applause does not arrive. Guilt acts as the final gatekeeper. Every boundary, every self-prioritized choice triggers it. You rest, and guilt whispers that you are selfish. You decline, and guilt insists you are ungrateful. You succeed, and guilt reminds you of the old pattern, that your identity depends on being needed. Jung distinguishes between true guilt, arising when values are violated, and neurotic guilt, arising when expectations imposed by others are violated instead. People pleasers are saturated in the latter, feeling guilt not for wrongdoing but for abandoning a role that no longer serves them. This stage of work is disorienting. You are no longer fully the person you were, yet not entirely the person you are becoming. The void between the old identity and the emerging self is uncomfortable. Many turn back at this point, apologizing excessively, overgiving, shrinking to recapture the old sense of safety. But if you remain present, if you allow the discomfort without yielding to it, something remarkable happens. You feel grounded. Your yes becomes meaningful. Your no becomes calm. Relationships realign organically, revealing those based on respect rather than access. Some connections will fall away, not because you have become worse, but because wholeness is threatening to dynamics built on your self-erasure. At this stage, you begin to sense the energy of coherence. You stop scanning rooms for approval. You stop rehearsing apologies. You stop anticipating reactions that once dictated your behavior. You come home to yourself. Jung would say that accepting yourself completely does not mean approving of every impulse or action. It means acknowledging every part, the anger you were taught to hide, the needs you suppressed, the boundaries you ignored. These are not flaws. They are signals. When integrated, they become sources of strength, clarity, and self-trust. You are not less kind when you stop people-pleasing. You are more honest, not harder, but clearer, not selfish, but sovereign. The work of individuation restores freedom without destroying compassion. The grounded self emerges, not performative or loud, but real, coherent, and present. You begin to operate from wholeness rather than fear. And here a quiet prompt emerges for reflection. Take a moment now to notice where in your life you still apologize unnecessarily, avoid conflict, or seek approval before acting. Where do you feel the pull to surrender yourself to maintain connection? Consider sharing these observations, writing them down or commenting, because articulating what you notice strengthens awareness and begins the work of integration. This is not judgment, it is acknowledgement. It is how unconscious patterns lose their grip. In this space, you begin to see how deeply people-pleasing is woven into your experience, and how quiet liberation begins in the ordinary moments. The pause before saying yes, the measured assertion of a boundary, the choice to honor your need without apology. Jung teaches that growth is incremental, subtle, and often invisible to the outside world, but internally transformative. The reclamation of energy, clarity, and self-trust is cumulative. This is the point where the journey shifts. The shadow is no longer only recognized, it is engaged. The automatic behaviors, the unconscious fears, the internalized rules, they are now visible and negotiable. Integration begins, and with it comes the possibility of living fully, not in fragments or masks, but in alignment with the self you were always meant to inhabit. Even as you reclaim your boundaries, assert your yes and no, and begin to integrate the shadow, there remains a quieter, deeper layer of challenge. The internal tension that comes from fully inhabiting your own life. For years, perhaps decades, you've lived partially in anticipation of others' reactions. You learned that harmony meant safety, that approval meant love, that avoiding tension meant survival. Jung observed that such conditioning shapes the nervous system and the psyche itself. Even when behaviors shift, the body remembers. It is here in these subtle, lingering tensions that the final tests of integration emerge. You notice it in the small ways: the hesitation before asserting your opinion, the slight tightness when you pause to refuse a request, the inner whisper that worries about judgment. This is the nervous system signaling that old patterns are still active, and yet you begin to act differently. You allow yourself to sit with discomfort without rushing to smooth it over. You speak your truth calmly, without justification or apology, and in doing so, you begin to notice something remarkable. Most people handle your boundaries. Some respect them more. Others reveal themselves as connected to your compliance rather than your selfhood. This clarity, though sometimes painful, is profoundly freeing. You also begin to observe the recurring patterns of guilt, the familiar pangs that accompany rest, refusal, or prioritization of self are not indicators of wrongdoing. They are echoes of old neurotic agreements, rules imposed by others or internalized during formative years. Jung teaches that the psyche distinguishes between neurotic and authentic guilt. Neurotic guilt arises from violating expectations that were never yours to carry. Recognizing this allows you to feel the discomfort without surrendering your autonomy. You begin to tolerate the unease, allowing it to exist without letting it dictate your actions. Approval hunger, too, becomes visible. You may notice the impulse to seek validation, subtly adjusting your behavior or words to receive affirmation. Yet with awareness, you see that external approval can never fully satisfy. It is temporary, fleeting, conditional. The work of individuation, Jung would say, is an internal authorization, agreeing with yourself before seeking agreement from others. You begin to trust your judgment, value your presence, and acknowledge your desires without needing constant affirmation. Approval becomes optional, not essential. Conflict, once terrifying, gradually loses its grip. You start to distinguish between true harm and discomfort arising from honesty. When someone disagrees, when tension arises, your body no longer construes it as existential threat. You can hold your ground, speak your truth, and remain intact. Jung emphasized that individuation requires the courage to stand psychologically whole, even when others do not mirror or affirm your selfhood. Every confrontation, every assertion becomes an opportunity for growth, a practice in inhabiting your authentic self fully. And the apology reflex, so automatic, so ingrained, softens over time. You begin to pause, reflect, and choose words that match reality rather than reflexive patterns. Silence, calm acknowledgement, or clarity often replaces unnecessary apology. In doing so, you reclaim energy, dignity, and self-trust. The simple act of noticing the impulse to apologize interrupts decades of conditioning and restores coherence between inner experience and outer expression. This phase of the journey is subtle and intimate. It is not dramatic. It is often invisible to the outside world. Yet internally, you feel the cumulative effect. Tension dissolves, energy returns, clarity strengthens. You are no longer living primarily in response to others' expectations. You inhabit yourself fully with steady presence. Jung teaches that wholeness is not achieved through force or performance, but through alignment, matching inner truth with outer action. Every conscious choice reinforces this coherence. It is also here that relationships shift. Those who respect your boundaries and your presence deepen. The connection is no longer rooted in compliance or obligation, but in mutual recognition of wholeness. Others previously sustained by your over-availability gradually fall away. This can feel like loss, yet it is liberation. Jung observed that individuation inevitably reorganizes the social field. Wholeness cannot coexist with systems built on self-sacrifice. Energy once given away unconsciously returns to you, and life begins to feel more real, more grounded, more coherent. At this point, reflection becomes essential. Notice how your old patterns, automatic yes, compulsive apology, avoidance of conflict, approval seeking, still appear in subtle ways. Where do you still defer your truth to maintain harmony? Where does guilt try to pull you back? Acknowledging these patterns, even without immediate correction, allows consciousness to strengthen. This is a key principle. What is brought into awareness loses its unconscious power. Awareness alone begins the process of reclaiming your energy and restoring alignment. Here is a critical insight. Growth is not about perfection. It is about consistent return to the self. Every pause before a yes, every conscious no, every unapologized for presence is a step toward integration. Jung teaches that individuation is incremental. The psyche resists transformation. Yet with sustained attention, each small act of alignment accumulates into profound psychological freedom. You are learning to inhabit yourself without shrinking, to exist without negotiating your worth, to connect without losing your center. The journey also invites deeper observation of the body. Tension, tightness, or subtle unease are not failures, they are signals. Jung emphasized the body as a repository of the shadow, holding unacknowledged feelings, unmet needs, and internalized rules. By noticing these sensations without judgment, by allowing them to exist alongside conscious action, you integrate the previously hidden aspects of self. This is not comfortable, yet it is transformative. In this ongoing practice, the reward is quiet but tangible. Energy returns. Clarity emerges. Boundaries feel natural rather than forced. Presence stabilizes. The nervous system learns that existing fully does not threaten survival, that self-trust is not dangerous, and that relationships can adapt without your collapse. The mask dissolves, the shadow is acknowledged, and a coherent self begins to operate in the world. As you move through this process, the cumulative effects of awareness, boundary setting, and shadow integration begin to crystallize. You notice a steadiness that was previously absent. Your energy is no longer quietly siphoned by old patterns of compliance. Your presence feels anchored in your own truth, and your interactions with others no longer carry the invisible weight of over-obligation. Jung would say that this is the emergence of the individuated self, whole, coherent, and psychologically sovereign. It is not the loud performative self, nor the carefully curated persona. It is the grounded self, fully inhabiting the life that is rightfully yours. With this wholeness comes a radical clarity in relationships. Connections that once felt comfortable yet draining now reveal their true nature. Some deepen, enriched by mutual respect and alignment. Others, dependent on your over-availability, gradually fall away. This is not loss in the sense of tragedy, it is liberation. Jung observed that individuation inevitably reshapes your social world. You no longer exist to fulfill expectations that were never yours. You no longer negotiate your boundaries to maintain harmony at the cost of your own vitality. The relationships that remain are authentic, reflective of truth rather than compliance. This stage also brings a new experience of freedom within yourself. You are no longer tethered to automatic patterns. The apology reflex softens, and when it arises, it is deliberate and appropriate rather than habitual. Conflict, once terrifying, becomes a field for clarity rather than avoidance. Approval is no longer sought as oxygen, but appreciated as optional affirmation. And guilt, once a constant companion, is recognized for what it is. The echo of old neurotic agreements, not an accurate measure of your integrity. Jung teaches that true self-acceptance involves tolerating discomfort, allowing tension, and trusting your inner guidance even when it challenges habitual fears. You begin to sense the quiet power of alignment. Every deliberate choice to inhabit your truth restores energy and strengthens coherence between mind, body, and action. The nervous system, once trained to react to fear and external expectation, recalibrates to safety, trust, and presence. You realize that the cost of self-abandonment was never worth the approval it bought. The reward of integration, however, is profound. Clarity, vitality, self-trust, and the ability to relate authentically. At this point, the work shifts from occasional practice to ongoing embodiment. Every situation, Every conversation, every decision, every encounter becomes an opportunity to affirm your alignment. The unconscious patterns that once dictated your behavior are now engaged consciously, softened by reflection, and met with deliberate action. Jung reminds us that individuation is not a destination, but a lifelong process of returning to the self moment by moment. There will be slips, moments when the old reflexes emerge, but with awareness, they no longer define you. They become signals to pause, notice, and realign. The final transformation is subtle yet irreversible. You discover that kindness flows naturally when rooted in wholeness. You give freely without depletion, connect without compromise, and engage without surrendering selfhood. You realize that being nice was never the goal. Being fully yourself, visible, grounded, and authentic is. In this state, you are not less kind, less generous, or less compassionate. You are simply real. You are sovereign. You are present. And the freedom that comes with that presence permeates every aspect of life. Take a moment now to reflect on your journey so far. Notice how your relationship to yourself has shifted. Where do you feel more aligned, more present, more coherent? Where do old patterns still whisper? Awareness itself is a form of integration. By observing without judgment, you continue the process of wholeness. If you feel moved, share these reflections, writing them, speaking them, or discussing them with someone you trust. This is not performance, it is participation in your own psychological freedom. Ultimately, what Jung teaches through this process is profound yet simple. Wholeness cannot coexist with self-abandonment. Masks, compulsive yeses, unnecessary apologies, and approval-seeking are survival strategies, not truths. Integration begins when you turn toward your shadow, inhabit your needs without fear, tolerate discomfort, and claim authority over your own life. It is a quiet revolution, a reclamation of energy, dignity, and coherence. And so, as you move forward, remember this. Subscribing, following, or continuing this journey is not about motivation or instant solutions. It is about alignment, depth, and ongoing self-acceptance. Each insight, each reflection, each conscious choice is a step toward inhabiting yourself fully. You have already taken the hardest step by staying present, by noticing the patterns that quietly drain you, and by committing to do the inner work of integration. From here, the path is living it, choosing yourself moment by moment, embodying wholeness, and cultivating connections that reflect, rather than deplete, your authentic self. This is not the end of the journey. It is a new beginning, the return to the self. And in this return, the freedom, clarity, and presence you gain are lasting, irreversible, and profoundly transformative.